I mean, no, yeah. Like, let's try to keep it clean.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
swore a couple times in the last stream.
You did.
It's been a bad habit.
I went through and chaptered it. I went through and chaptered it. I was just like, ooh, all right.
I need to break that habit. It's not good.
Well, and some level of swearing is
It's
fine, but as long as you're not like going excessive,
Well,
mhm.
it's
we're
funny.
mostly adults.
Ashley and I would go to Disney World, and I'd be in the habit of swearing, and she'd be like, I'm trying to describe what she says without swearing in the process. But the point is that she would discourage me from doing so.
I said it seems that some of the filters aren't quite working. It's a little bit too transparent
Oh,
on a couple of these. So see if you can like blow up the opacity. It's on the ones that are color, right? Um,
which
pretty much every one of the windows, right? So here's a quick thing that you can do. You can go to there's a folder that's the background, right? Lower the opacity of the checkerboard, right?
Okay.
Like we want that like nice kind of gentle pattern, right? But like right now it's a little bit too prominent.
All right. I'm not sure how to change
You
the
can also
opacity.
so it's the filters. So you select the element, and then on the top bar there's one called filters, and
Okay.
then one of the filters is color correction, and it has opacity, so you can bring that down. The other thing that you can do is that you can potentially darken the base color, um, um, which should be the element directly under it. And that should just be a double click, select color, and then bring that down. Feel free
So
to like bring it into the stream, right? If you need to configure.
yeah, I'm gonna make this extremely trippy. And
I mean, like the goal is readability, but also like for people to be able to just see what's going
I
on.
mean,
So,
it looks fine to me, but I don't have the same like eye for those kind of details as you do.
okay, all right. Like we'll ask chat, right? If like, hey, do you need us to like darken? Because yeah, so go to your sources, and then go to the bottommost color source,
Okay.
the bottommost one.
And then
Yeah.
filters on that. There's no
Uh,
filters.
no, no, the color source. So I'm asking you to change the color on that. So double click on
Oh,
it and
okay.
then select color. Yeah, and then just grab a slightly darker purple, and I think it should come together. This is a spooky stream. It's too well lit for the spooky stream.
Oh, it's weird that there's no this was the previous color and here's the new color bit.
Oh, sorry for that. I thought I was muted.
Oh, you were muted.
Yeah. So select color. Yeah, and then
Does this look
yeah.
better?
Yeah. Let me. Oh wait. Yeah. You're doing it live.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the actual YouTube, just to see what the final output looks like.
And the color correction or the opacity of the
Yeah.
checkerboard, I sort of
Yeah. Lower.
lower.
You want it to be a suggestion rather than to draw
Okay.
people's attention, right? Because like I was ironically inspired by Earthbound menus.
All right. I feel like
Okay.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's looking good. It's looking good. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, keep the checkerboard opacity low,
Hmm.
and I think it will come together.
See, you're inspired by Earthbound. I'm inspired by Sonic the Hedgehog. So checkerboard
Yeah. So
like
yeah,
blunt,
Sonic the Hedgehog is like another really
vibrant
good sort of
colors.
example. Yeah, but like our sort of dominant colors are purple and orange.
Hmm.
We may just get a graphic designer person to switch that out.
Yeah.
Um, but at least for now, hopefully the stream is readable and comes together. It's looking good. All right. So should we say that we're live?
Yeah, I think so. Make all the announcement posts.
All right. Chris, would you like to make the announcement? So you can either do it in announcements or you can just like post in general, right? Because we already have the post from before.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and no, because the town announcements is the thing where it pushes it out to a bunch of other servers, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So Yeah, I'll do another post an announcement, and it'll have the direct YouTube stream link. So at least the embed is different than the embedded event from the last one.
And then the Patreon post also went out. So yeah, I mean we're going full saturation on this. Let's see who comes. And nobody does. That's cool too.
The person who submitted their project won't even show up.
Oh, that's wrong. Okay, so it's because yeah, starting in 1 minute, we went on a little bit early. It's good that we went on early. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I do want to get chat like behind the pictures in the bottom corner, like up until the on deck section in the future.
Yeah. I can figure out what I need to do with that. Right now, I thought just some seasonal decorations would be good.
Yeah.
I really like the bony cat. I was trying to get bats in, and I was just
into draft mode, right? Like it doesn't publish right when I hit enter in announcements.
Right, and then there's a publish button. Yes. Boom.
Perfect.
All right, we're live. Yeah. So for whatever reason, it actually takes a couple seconds before it propagates it out. I think this might be new. So it's going to take a bit, and then it's going to appear in the server that I've set aside for the test, for announcements and things like that. And then what you can also do is we can start the event in Discord itself. Should we add Axilla?
Honestly, that might not be a bad idea, just specifically because...
Yeah. Well, no, I just don't want to... I mean, I don't know, it's up to you guys. I don't want to ping her if she's still getting ready and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while we wait for folks to filter in, why don't you show us what you've been up to with the Chris, the announcement went live.
Nice.
Yeah. Isaiah, why don't you show us what you've been up to with 1.6?
Yeah, I can do that. Let me open that up. I have Asilla's project open, so I'll just gotta switch to that real quick. Okay.
Showing up on stream. Oh, now
it should be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Bit of a delay.
So I'm gonna go into battle, and we'll be able to see that I've got a few different zones. I've got I now have a description for what happens when you look at the deck and the discard, and I just wrote a bit of flavor text to test out multiple lines. And then I've got the exile zone here, which is a custom zone I can specify the details to. And I had at one point, I want to say bash. I thought I had, yeah. So they have a card passive which says start in the discard, and you can see that right off the bat, all of my bashes are in the discard. This new card passive will work for any zone, so you can say start in the deck if you want it to do literally nothing. You can say start in hand, which was a passive that previously already worked. But you can also say start in the custom zone. I've got the custom zone called exile. So it just searches for the name of whatever zone you define. So if I reboot this, the bashes should be in the exile zone when I go into battle.
I'm a little bit confused. Like everybody is on that will be attending is online. Have they just not received the announcement, or are they just like not able to get into chat?
Could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
Finishing, snacking, quick restroom break before they hop in.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Also, select
Well,
undefined
I
cards
think
from the selection. That's an unfinished bit. I'm gonna patch that.
yes, yeah, that does need to be patched. But yeah, honestly, good stuff. It's how many total zones have you tested with?
So
I'm
I've only
curious what the
tested
upper
with
limit is.
one extra
Yeah.
zone, but if I we've got
Let's add 4.
yeah, okay.
Or no, let's do the Pokemon card game. So like you have like the little placements
Oh,
in front
God.
of you. Yeah.
What should I call the zones?
Just A, B, C, D.
Okay. Zone A.
Because I'm so creative. Yeah.
Image
Dude,
sheet.
I just remember how few kids at my age understood how to play the Pokemon card game when it came out.
I didn't even know it was a game. I just thought you like collected the cards and like because like I just thought baseball cards, right?
Yeah.
So
I knew there was a game, but I was just like, how do you play this?
I've got when my partner and I went to get candy for kids for trick or treating, we found it turns out they sell essentially these mini booster packs to hand out for kids when trick or treating, which is
It's adorable, actually.
Yeah, contain 3 cards each, and they're little packages with a spooked Pikachu like with a Mimikyu behind it, which is adorable.
pretty good.
That's such an underhanded marketing play too, to like sell a booster pack that is less than a normal booster pack and designed to be handed out to a bunch of children.
Hey, Rico made it.
Hello,
This is
Rico.
devious.
It is great,
Yeah.
but the other thing about it is that it's also like an extremely good like card per dollar value. Like if you wanted to just buy them and keep them for yourself. Like if a booster pack for 10 cards costs $5, you know, oh, I gotta change the X coordinate here.
So Reiko, we're going through some of what Isaiah has done for Card Game Combat 1.6. Namely, we are experimenting around with multiple custom zones. I would be curious in chat, what have your experiences been with the Pokemon collectible card game? Has that been a thing that any of you have invested time in? Have you turned it into some kind of speculative marketing scheme like the Paul brothers? Let me know.
Have the Paul brothers like done something with Pokemon
Yeah,
cards?
It's awful. Like they spiked the value specifically of a type of Charizard.
Oh man.
There's like a shiny Charizard and things like that, and then yeah, like they did a video that was like, oh, we brought in an expert, and they're like, oh, this is a really good investment, and it turns out it was a scam.
Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've
Oh, go ahead.
I've created a couple zones. I think it might be visually a little bit of a mess. Well, I was correct. Oh, and also you can't scroll to them because I haven't put them in the button order plugin parameter. But I made it so that refresh, instead of expanding, it'll go to I believe zone B. And so you'll notice the effects happen and then the game crashes. So that's neat.
It's good. It's good. We're doing some live troubleshooting. We're testing out the game.
Yeah, I want to actually. I'm gonna redo that so I can see like what the issue is. First, I want to verify that cut should work. Yeah, it'll get removed on use. So refresh. What's going on here? Cannot read property add of null. Okay, so it looks like it could not find the name of the zone. So I had zone B, and I wonder if this is a case sensitivity issue. Because
no worries. So Reiko's asking for a clarification. So I was just asking about if you had any experience with the Pokemon TCG. Chris is in chat. Thank you.
I'm changing zone B to all lowercase to see if there's a case sensitivity issue, and that's what's going on. And if not, then I'll spend some more time after the stream looking into what the issue is. Okay, good news. That was what the issue is. So I know what bug to fix before this gets released. But yeah, refresh, instead of getting sent to the discard when it's used, it gets sent to zone B. And
Nice.
So now if you want like 60 different zones, I have no idea what it'll do to the frame rate, but it will work.
So have you managed to calculate what the frame load of adding a zone is?
So fundamentally, it's not hugely different from just adding a card, because so essentially what goes on is every frame, all of the cards on the screen have to update their position, right? So that we can have the smooth movement when you change selection and stuff like that. And so every zone, every frame is iterating in a for loop for the cards that belong to them. And the cards that the zones that show their cards, such as the discard pile and the exile pile right now, you can see the card. Those cards are physically present. Even when they're stationary, they still exist in the for loop. So they are some marginal drain on resources as a result. However, the zones that don't show the cards, for example, the deck, there's no card image. Once a card gets to the deck, it gets destroyed in order to save resources, which means that every frame, the for loop that it runs through it's got a length of 0, so it goes through really quickly. So all in all, the only real resource drain is the extra sprites that make up the zone itself, which is the sprite for the zone's appearance, and then the sprite used for the amount number that gets updated whenever a card is added or removed from the zone, which is not a huge deal once they're created. And I believe they're all created in the same frame, so that might cause the startup for battle to slow down. But actual gameplay performance really shouldn't be too big of a deal as long as you don't have 600 cards in play.
Okay. So let's give Excella another 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And if they show up, cool, we'll showcase again. If not, then we will go into the plugin workshop. And then whenever if they join us later on down the line, once the workshop is done, we'll do the showcase then. Because I feel weird doing the showcase without them.
Yeah, for sure. So
I say we should bias towards action and definitely move forward with the plugin stuff. I think this is especially the custom zones. Now that Reiko's in to see, it would be really fun to keep on diving into.
Yeah. So Neil and I suppose also Chris, I want to get, and also chat, I want to get your opinion on what happens with the card visually while it's in play. So right now, when you play a card, I'll attack Slime C. So it sort of rises up, and then I'll try it with a card that doesn't get removed immediately. So it rises up, and then the effect happens, and then once that resolves, it moves to its relevant zone. I'm not sure how I like this also gets expended. I'm not sure how I like the visuals of it just sort of hanging there while it's in play, but I'm not sure where to put it. Do you have any opinions on that?
So different card games handle this in different ways. So you're handling it in what's for example Hearthstone, right? Where card hangs sort of in the air, right? Mm-hmm. And then the animation happens, right? And then it usually either dissolves as part of the animation, or it goes puts itself into the zone. And then there's a more elaborate animation because they're dealing with a sort of 3D kind of thing. I think that the best thing to do here would be to create a sort of hanging coordinate in the plugin parameters that users could specify. And that way, for example, let's say that they're doing a Darkest Dungeon style, the enemies are all laid out and the actors are all laid out in a line. For the games that use that setup and card games, the cards usually appear above where the battlers are at, right?
Yeah.
And not above not necessarily above the hand. So I think if you give a little bit of control to the users, they will be able to determine what is correct for their game. Because some may want the hanging coordinate to be like off to the side, like think like the preview cards for that card game that we did.
Mhm. Yeah, I was definitely thinking about that as a solution. And I think that's probably, first of all, probably a better solution than this. Not that this is necessarily a bad one. But yeah, I was essentially thinking about creating another zone for just this one card. And that way you can specify, what its rotation is, what its like scale is as well. And I wasn't sure how I felt about dedicating that much to it.
Yeah, I think once we get to the stress testing phase, we'll have to see. But I think this should be user determined. I don't think even if we come up with like a solution that is aesthetically good for our default card game, especially with the game that will showcase uh, this stream, we'll see that like, oh yeah, the end user wants to change like every element, right, of the game
Yeah.
to sort of fit their vision. And I think that our solution should be the thing that enables that. Personally, that's what I think.
Yeah, I do want to go over because essentially the way a lot of the plugin parameters have changed for 160. The version number still says 157, but it's 160, so ignore that. Buttons are now structs, so extra buttons fit very nicely within the core plugin. Zones are now also structs, except for the hand, which sort of has a special situation. And so if I do have like maybe I just need coordinates, or maybe I need, like the entire sort of benefit of the struct. But yeah, so that makes defining extra zones much easier, because I just, now it's an array of things you can do. And I'm hoping that this system doesn't overwhelm the user, that it actually makes it a little bit easier to look through the parameters and find something.
Likely it will overwhelm, but we're going to be working on tutorial materials for that, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's good that the functionality is there, and then we can work on the onboarding. One of the things that I think would be kind of neat is so Reiko mentions in chat the idea of using scale, right? So using the X and Y scale to grow the card. And this would actually work really well. Let's say that if your hand is mini cards, and then when you play them, they go to full size, right? Sort of as part of the animation.
Mm-hmm.
So Isaiah, we have a Patreon plugin called Card Particle Effects, which allows you to sort of program the particle effects a little bit. How viable would it be? And I'm not saying this needs to be in 160, but how viable would it be to allow the users to have a couple of those controls to manipulate the sprite skill card?
Oh man. So like just sort of like.
And the answer can be no, right? But like treating essentially the card once it is played as a particle, and then being able to like change the scale, change the like sinusoidal movement, right? Being able to do wacky things with it, causing it to like turn into a puff of smoke, right? I think that's pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I will say, like, when a card moves to a zone, it does change to the scale of the zone. So if I were to make the temporary position of the card as it's being played into its own zone, people would get that sort of behavior. But the idea of like, I might have to see like essentially like a feature document, like a feature request document to really visualize sort of how we might want to implement something more specific than that, if that makes sense.
It could be that something like that in particular is best decoupled from something like card zones.
Yeah.
Because it's so specific to like animations.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, like a robust card animation suite would be worth being its own like project in and of itself. to say like, hey, I'm going to do a lot of these card animations to sweep them across the place, maybe tile them across the screen, scale them, shrink them, etc.
Because I can say, let me open up the plugin for 160. I just got to find that real quick. No, not create new plugin. Whoops. Because I was experimenting with changing the size of it before I determined that like just doing that without giving the user without giving the user control over that. Yeah, so it's this function. So I had this, and if I uncomment it, and if I change this to like 2.0, for example, then I can go in and I can use a card, and it will double in size while it's being used, and it'll cover everything up, but that's okay. So now it's big, and I draw a card. Actually, wasn't that? Oh, I don't know. There's one that makes me discard a card. Oh, that's Fury. So you can definitely do something with that. Like if I turn those into parameters that people can control. And it's not, I mean, fundamentally, because I've already got this code working for all the zones, it wouldn't be that difficult to extend that functionality. Yeah. But yeah, I think anything more advanced than that, it would have to be a specific plugin.
Yeah, no, it's cool that you only needed to edit a couple things, and all of a sudden, scale is working, right, as a little hang time behavior. Okay, so it's been nearly 20 minutes. I think we should start the work.
Okay. Do we want to go through? Do we want to go through Asila's project, or do we want to start with plugin tutorials?
No. I think we don't want to do showcase Asila's project until they're here.
Yeah.
Largely because they have specific questions that they wanted to ask. Also, that it would give them the spotlight, so they could talk in chat like, "Oh, I was thinking about this," right? Creative process stuff.
Yeah. I think
we want to give. Okay, all right. So let's switch gears, and then Isaiah, make sure to switch the current topic to plugin work.
Oh, yes.
When you have a chance.
Yeah, let me do that now. What are we calling this plugin tutorial? I'm calling it plugin tutorial.
I like plugin workshop, but feel free to
I definitely
change it to whatever you.
Plugin workshop is definitely better. You're right.
Okay, all right. Whichever you prefer. Like the only reason I asked for that is that it'll help with the chaptering after the bot comes out.
Yeah. So let me get the project ready.
So what's our goal for the plugin workshop this particular session?
Yeah, so I want to go through sort of the basics of. I want to start with setting up the plugin itself, because that was something that I skipped over last time, and that caused an error when trying to use things, and I can explain why it caused the error. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to sort of go over how. Last time we talked about how to extend a Windows function. I want to talk about defining a function, sort of adding functionality to a window, dynamically adding a window to a scene by using extending functions, and then doing some stuff with the windows. So if at any point anybody in chat has any questions, even if that question is, hey, can you slow down and repeat yourself? Neil or Chris, let me know, because I will I will probably be too focused to see that about chat. But yeah, feel free to interrupt me about any of that.
before you start, I just wanted to shout out Vibrant Fervor is in chat.
Hey.
Thank you so much for coming. Vibrant Fervor, we were showing off a little bit of custom zones before we started the workshop. We'll have a chance to showcase that near the end of the stream as well. So stick around.
So the first thing that I want to say is that if you've watched another popular How to Make an RPG Maker plugin tutorial series, which is currently unlisted, despite being, in my opinion, still very good, you might have seen them tell you to write function, and then parentheses, and then brackets, and then put all your code in here, right? Or something to the effect of this syntax. Visual Studio really doesn't like this syntax, so there's probably something in here that's incorrect. But essentially what the other tutorial is telling you to do is they want you to write an anonymous function. And inside this anonymous function is where all of your code is going to go. And when RPG Maker loads the plugin, it will execute this function. So all of the code that you write in here will happen when it executes the function. All of the variables that you declare will exist inside the function, but they won't exist outside the function. So if I were to say, var foo equals 7, if I were to console.log foo, then it would give me 7. But if I were to put var foo equals 7 inside this function, this would give me an error now, because foo only exists inside the function. And that's the scope of the variable that we define. And essentially, the reason that people will encourage you to write your plugins this way is exactly the same reason that I will encourage you not to write your plugins this way. Because other plugin developers might want access to your variables. Now, you should be careful not to define your variables in a very specific way that they can be accidentally accessed. But for example, if I define a new class inside this function, there's no guarantee that the next person working on plugins will not need access to that class. Like, for example, I've been commissioned to extend things for very specific projects with very specific plugins they're using, and I've been like, okay, I actually have to edit this plugin directly because it uses this anonymous function, and so I can't access anything in the function by writing my own plugin. I just have to edit somebody else's plugin, and that's you don't want to write. Yeah.
So I think that you may be referencing things that are specific if you're on the programming track, right, of an RPG Maker development.
That's true.
I think while most of our audience, right, are fairly competent with script evals and things like that, I think they may be missing a little bit of the context of what you're talking about.
That's fair.
So could we begin with what is a function?
Yeah. So in theory, a function is a set of code that you can call and have repeated instances. So if I say var foo equals function, and then say console.log hey, then anytime I call foo, if I go foo, then the console will say hey, and that'll be great. What makes anonymous functions unique is that they are anonymous. They don't have names. So you might store them in a variable, like technically this function is anonymous and then we're stored in a variable, so it's actually not anonymous anymore. But this just runs on its own, and then because we don't have a reference to it, we can never access it ever again. So it'll only really be run once. And it has the benefit of having the scope of variables. So the way that I recommend writing a plugin when you want to start writing a plugin is you want to start by defining an object. And in all of my plugins, if I go to the card game combat code, you can see I say var Isaiah equals well, I say it equals Isaiah. We'll explain that in a second. So I say var Isaiah equals, and then I create a new object. So Isaiah is an object that shares my name, that has no properties inside of it. And so what you can do is you can give it some properties. For example, Isaiah.foo equals function. And now it's got a function inside of it. And if you just define a function, RPG Maker will call that function immediately when the plugin is loaded. But if you define a function inside of an object, then it'll wait until you call the function manually. So that's how you typically want to define your own functions in RPG Maker. If they don't belong to a specific class, then it's encouraged that you make a class or an object and give it to that class. So that way it doesn't run the function as soon as the game boots up.
So as an example, let's say I'm Reiko, right? I have decided to become a plugin developer now on top of my excellent art skill. So would I, instead of saying var Isaiah, I would say like var Reiko, create an object, and then Reiko.foo. And then that way, if Reiko's plugin is working alongside yours, both of them can work independently without sort of cross-contamination happening.
Yeah, I could say var Reiko equals object, and then Reiko.foo equals function. And I'll give this one console.log Isaiah, and then I'll give the other one I'll give the other one console.log Reiko. And if I call Isaiah.foo and Reiko.foo, it will call the first one and the second one, because it will call the one that belongs to me and then the one that belongs to Reiko, because we get to specify each one. And the other thing is, if I say Isaiah.foo2, and I say this.foo, the this in this context is the object that foo2 belongs to, which in this case is Isaiah. So I'll say this.foo, so it calls foo twice, so it's foo2. So whenever you see the keyword this, if you see it inside an object, then the this in this context is the object. Which is also why you'll see, if I go to RPG Windows, I'll skip initialize because it's maybe a little bit complex. Yeah, so we'll see window-base.prototype.load window skin equals function. And then it says this.window skin. So there's a window skin variable that belongs to this specific object. And this specific object in this case is an instance of window base, because window base is instantialized. So it only belongs to the specific window base that called the load window skin function. And if I were to just say window skin, then it would be like, what window skin? Var window skin? The one that exists outside of all functions? So you always want to say this whenever you're referring to instance variables. So
now I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh yeah. So as someone with a programming background, but not necessarily programming JavaScript, this is one fascinating to me that anonymous functions just run. That's neat. I guess.
Specifically, RPG Maker. When it loads in plugins, it runs the plugins.
Okay.
Which is also why we want to store functions inside variables that belong to objects, so that it does not run the functions immediately. If I were to just say var foo3 equals function. Oh, Jesus. I don't know how to type. If I were to just do that, then it would run that immediately. Whereas it won't do that for Isaiah.foo or Isaiah.foo2.
Okay. And then in this way, so that's where the terminology comes in as well in a lot of ways, where an anonymous function is just something with an unspecific way of accessing it so it just is run when accessed.
Yeah.
And the RPG Maker is just accessing things that you feed it to in its JavaScript file.
So I'm gonna give you a very advanced use case for an anonymous function.
Yeah, I guess that was going to be my next question, but I didn't know if it fit into the scope of this lesson, something you wanted to cover. Like, is that a cheeky way of having an initialize step in these kind of functions, in these files?
Yeah, so one way that you can use anonymous functions is you can say, okay, here's a function that takes a function as a parameter. And we went over parameters very briefly last session, but just as a refresher, parameter is any value that you can pass to a function. So in this case, I'm going to say we're going to call the function, or we might have to say .call this. But that will call the function that is passed. And so I could say this dot advanced and then call or pass this dot foo if I wanted. And it would be without the parentheses because I'm passing the function and not not calling the function and then passing the return value. But something else that I can do is I can say I can do one of these where I actually pass a function that I define in real time. And so this is an anonymous function, but it's a function that I'm passing as a parameter inside another function, and then the function that I give it to calls that anonymous function. So the only reason I'm giving you this information is because you, Chris, specifically asked, but this is a very advanced thing that most plugin developers are not going to run into, at least not for a while. There are some situations in which we're going to do basically this exact thing, particularly when it comes to loading images. But the template for that is pretty copy paste, and I can explain sort of how it works. If we won't get to that today. But yeah, essentially what's happening.
Let's focus on what we're supposed to do today, which is actually getting the plugin working and putting it in the plugin manager.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we sort of refocus on that?
Absolutely. So I've created a new object called Isaiah, and then what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that a new window is added to the title screen. Let me close out of this. So we want to create a new. It'll just be a window base, and then we'll draw some text onto the window base. But what we want to do is we want to find where the title scene creates windows, right? And so we want to go into RPG scenes because that's where all the scenes are. And then essentially
what's the difference between a scene and a window?
That's a great question. Yeah. So a scene, let me actually boot up the game and I can sort of like break that down. So I'll skip the title scene for a second. So this is a scene on its own, even though it doesn't have any windows except for the message window. Map scenes work a little bit differently from all the other scenes in RPG Maker because this is objectively not a menu. Most of them are menus. But if I open up the pause menu, this is the menu scene. That's the name of this scene. And you can see that it has 3 windows currently. And if I go to the skill scene, you can see that it has 4 windows and so on. And so a window is essentially its purpose as a class is that it is a container of information. By default in RPG Maker, all windows have the same window skin. So if your question is X a window and it looks like one of these windows, in vanilla RPG Maker, the answer is yes, that's a window. And if it doesn't look like this, then no, it's not a window. There are some exceptions. Like I think the the battle log is a window, and some other battle window like doesn't have the outlines, which is weird. But the purpose of a window is to contain information, and there are 3 different types of windows, which are all incidentally visible on screen right now. So a window base, any window that inherits from window base has all of the basic drawing functionality of a window. But it is not designed to do anything. It is not designed to be interacted with. And so we can see that the gold window in the corner, there is no way to interact with this window. It displays the amount of gold that you have, and it doesn't do anything else. And that inherits from window base directly. And then we have window selectable, which is maybe a better example would be the item list. Not that I have any items. But it's a window which this is a window selectable, but it's a window which has a list of items in it, a list of pieces of information in it that you can scroll through, you can interact with, and when you hit OK, it does something with that information. Where the thing that it does is the same regardless of which piece of information it's manipulating. So no matter who I select here, it's going to go to the skill window, but it's going to bring the specific thing that I select to the skill window. The final of the 3 types of windows is window command. And this carries over all of the behaviors from window selectable, but now each item in the window will perform a different action when I select them. So the item button here will take me to the item scene. The status will open up this guy, and then when I hit OK, it'll take me to the status screen. The options one will take me to the options screen. So these 3 windows, in order from most basic to most advanced, base, selectable, and then command, these 3 make up all other windows in RPG Maker. And if you can understand these 3 windows, you can understand every single window that makes up RPG Maker. Does that make sense so far?
So one question that I had is that, let's say that you create an NPC, you write some dialogue for them, and then you're talking to the NPC. Is that also a window?
Yeah. So let me, instead of processing I'll have it show test. Hello, this is a window. And the preview isn't useful. But if I go in, hello, this is a window. It's got the same window skin as everybody else. And I believe what's happening on the map is that the message window always exists. As soon as you enter the map, the message window exists. However, it is fully closed and it has no text in it. And it's only once we fill it with text that it opens and then displays. And then when it's done, it closes again. And so to sort of get back to your first question more concisely, a scene is a specific like menu of the game or the map in this case. And then a window is something that belongs to the scene that contains a more specific category of information.
All right. So now that we know the difference between scenes and windows, how do we make one of these?
Right. So, so our goal is to create a window on the title screen. So I'll go back to the title screen, and we can see there's really only one window here. Stream Project might be a window as far as we know, like the title of this, because it's got text, so that's one of the clues that there's a window. But we know for sure that there's a window here, which contains new game continue options. So if I wanted to know how to find information about where this window is created, the first thing that I would want to do is find out what the name of this window is. So I might want to go actually into RPG Windows and say, I'll look up title and I'll see if I can find something. And I'm looking for a class definition. And here we have window title command. And let's see, which type of window is this? It's not a base because we interact with it. Each button does a different thing, so it's got to be a command. So window title command, that's probably the one that this is, right? So now we want to find out, where does window title command come up in RPG scenes? Because the windows always belong to a scene. So whenever something is creating a window, it is a scene creating a window. So if I find a reference to window title command, that happens in scene boot. I don't think this is scene boot, so let's see if we can find something in scene title. Okay, so the function create command window is the function that creates the title command window. That all makes sense so far. So if I wanted to, I could say, okay, scene create command window, and then let's give it another window underneath this. I'm not going to do that because I could say this dot new window equals new window. I'm not going to do that because then create command window is doing more than just creating the command window. It's creating a second window on top of that. And that's just bad programming practice. So let's find out where this function is being called and call a second function underneath it. So we've got, scene title.prototype.create creates the background, creates the foreground, creates the window layer, and then it creates the one window. So that's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say do that, and then create new window. And I just need to define scene title.prototype.create new window. And now any code. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, without it being too complicated. So previously when we were making the function, if you remember, like we were doing the Isaiah.foo, Reiko.foo, it was pretty easy, right? What is prototype?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And the simple answer is that scene title is a class, and scene title.prototype is the template. Whenever you create a new instance of an object, you are using the prototype of that particular class. So if I were to go to, so you can see function scene title, whenever you call scene title, if I were to say scene title, if I were to do that, then it would create a new class, or a new instance of the class, and then call the function initialize, which is this function, which actually calls a different function's initialize, but that's neither here nor there. And so scene title.prototype is a new, it creates a new object based on the prototype of the parent class. So scene title.prototype equals object.create scene base.prototype. The simple version of what that means is that scene title inherits all behavior from scene base. The more complicated version of what that means is scene base.prototype is defined, and then scene title is defined containing all of the definitions that scene base has, and then anything added onto that afterwards, such as in all of these functions, is where it differs from scene base, whether that's new stuff or alternate stuff. And then the prototype. Go ahead.
If I'm understanding this correct, so if I'm understanding this correctly, it's sort of like you're building on top of kind of what already exists, right? So like you create like scene base, right? And then you're like, well, this function will work like something scene base already does. I'm just going to call it something different.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yeah. You like scene base does a bunch of different stuff, and then scene title, because it inherits from scene base, it does a bunch of different stuff, and then extra stuff on top of that. And that's what we call inheritance. When I say every window class inherits from base, selectable, or command, what I mean is we can see title command inherits from window command. Window command is its parent class, is another way to put it. And it'll work fundamentally the same way that window command will work. But there are some differences. Its window width is 240, for example, whereas another, the default window width for window command might be something different. Its make command list function contains different code than its parent class's make command list function. But because it inherits behavior from window command, anytime you call window command's make command list function, the child class, its child function is called in its place.
Okay. Let's go ahead and build that function.
All right. So, so we know we want to say, okay, make a new window. We got to see a little bit in RPG scenes how create command window works, where we create a variable and then we say equals new window and then the name of the window class. Set handler is specifically a command function, so that's not something that we want to do if we want to inherit from window base. In fact, we probably just want to use window base right now. So let me find window base. So whenever you create a new function, you want to find whenever you create a new window, you want to find its initialize function. Something great about RPG Maker is that every single class in RPG Maker's code has an initialize function. Every declaration function that creates a new instance of a class calls initialize.apply, which basically means that it calls the initialize function. So if I want to say, let's say var win equals new window base, I could supply it no parameters and it would interpret that all as 0, essentially. But we can see that it wants 4 parameters, which are x, y, width, and height. You can probably guess what these parameters are referring to. They're referring to coordinates. So if I say 0, 0, actually let's give it a little bit of buffer space. Let's say 40, 40, and then let's make it 300 and 200. We would expect to see a window which is roughly around here, which is wider than it is tall. It's 300 pixels wide, 200 pixels tall. And if I save this, let me make sure that I do already have it installed. That's great. So if I save this, we want to refresh and we want to see the title.
But let's say somebody had to do it from scratch. What would it look like?
Somebody had to do what do you mean?
So let's say that they wrote
they
wrote the plugin. Yeah. What is that process?
So you've saved your plugin. You've put it in the plugins folder. You essentially need to. Oh, that's the wrong button. You need to make sure that it's in the plugins folder, and then select it. Make sure it's on. If there are any parameters, we'll get into parameters in a future date, almost certainly. And a common mistake made by me specifically is that sometimes I will forget to put it in the project and wonder why it's not working. But here, I want to point out we wrote this code. This is definitely executing, probably, right? Like there's a way we can check if it's executing. But for now, we can assume it's executing, but the window's not showing up. And why is that? Let's look back at our create command window, the function that we're sort of basing things on. Let's see if there's some extra information that we can use here. So we want to ignore the set handler functions; those are not useful here. But there's this extra bit that says this.add window. So if I had to guess what this function does just by looking at it, I would say it takes the window that we created and adds it to the scene so that it becomes visible in some way. We already have a reference to it in the form of a variable, so this just makes it actually a part of the scene, like wholesale. So if I were to copy paste that and replace this .command window with the variable that we have here, maybe I save, oops, and now it works. Now that we've added the window. And we can see that it's exactly the dimensions that we specify. If we set this to 200, not 2000, it'll be too far away from the screen. If we set it to 200, the x coordinate changes. If we set this to 400, the y coordinate changes, and I think it'll be, yeah, it'll cover up the command window. And generally speaking, it's good practice to say this dot new window. It's generally good practice to store it in a variable that belongs to the object. So that way, a different function you can access it by accessing this dot new window. And I don't know if I necessarily want to go into the details of how add window works because it's not that useful information.
Yeah.
But the basic gist. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we're seeing the window now. So that's fantastic. What if we want to let's say that we want that window up for like a mini game, right? And then the mini game's over. We still want that window around in case they start the mini game again, but we want to hide it for the rest of gameplay. Would we be able to do that now that scene title has like this new window? Now, obviously, you don't do the mini game on the title screen unless like you're Heavy Rain or something. But I think that but I think do you understand like the function that I'm requesting?
So there are a couple different ways to accomplish this. The first is if I want to make sure that it's out of the way. So I'm going to refresh again, and I want to point out some specific behavior of the command window. Actually, I don't even need to look at the command window. We can look at the message box. So when I talk to the bat, it's going to say, hello, this is a window. And you'll notice that the height of the window changes before the text appears. It goes from no height to full height. And then when I close it, it goes from full height to no height in a rapid succession. These are functions that window-based has called open and close. I'll actually write that here. I'll say this dot new window dot close. And what we'll probably see when we hit refresh is we'll see you blink and you miss it. The window appears and then it quickly shrinks and disappears. So if I were to say
now. This would be a dumb way of doing this, but like, could you like put in like a wait before it closes the window?
Yeah, I'm like trying to come up with the best way to wait. I think maybe
while loop, right?
So I think what I'm probably gonna do is I'm gonna use the console, because even though it's a little unwieldy, it's I'm not using a plugin. I'll say var win equals scene manager .scene / new window, and then if I say win .close, it closes. But if I say win .open, it opens. And so these functions sort of work automatically. There's a variable if I say win .openness. I don't know why the underscore is invisible. If I say that equals 0, then it'll disappear. And then I got to say win.open again, and it'll open. So if you want to do something where something starts closed and then opens, such as what the title command does, then you can set its variable automatically and then call the function. Another option that you have is you can say win.hide. And that just makes it disappear instantly. Win.show makes it appear instantly. And the benefit here is, depending on how you want the window to disappear. If you want it to be smooth, you can open and close it, and then it'll have that little sort of animation. And if you want it to be instantaneous, you can do hide and show. But something else you can do is I can say win.hide, win.close. win.show. And even though I've shown it, it's not visible, and that's because it's closed. So I got to say win.open, and now it becomes visible. So there are essentially two layers of being able to hide, to make a window not visible. Does that all make sense?
Yeah. I do want to open the floor up to the chat. So this is a very basic functionality. This is probably what most people use plugins for, right? Is that you want to customize your UI. So you want to like make new windows and things like that. So we've gone through a bunch of code explanation. I just kind of want to throw it to chat and see, do you have any questions? Is there like, do you have a specific request? Is there something you would like us to put in the window, right? Maybe like text, images. Let's hear it.
I was gonna cover text next if nobody else asks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's give them like a couple minutes, and if there's a question that needs to be explained, right, then we can go do that. And if everything's good, then we can move on ahead, right, and start making the window fancier.
All right.
Can we move the window across the street?
So we can. That's
can
just
we
a little
make the
bit more
window
complicated.
dance?
Yeah, like can you like do like a sine wave, right, as like the window?
The short answer is yes, but not within one tutorial session.
Yeah, I figured.
Getting moving windows is a little bit. I mean, you will notice that there is exactly one moving window in all of RPG Maker, and it's the status window.
Okay, so give chat like one more minute, and then maybe use this time to like grab some water.
Yeah, I'm trying to hydrate.
Okay, Fervor seems to be good on questions so far.
All right.
Reiko, how are you holding up? If you do have questions later on down the line, or if you have questions like even after the stream, right, about this stuff, we'll make the code available, and we can continue like sort of this learning process.
So I think it's super useful to look at this information and ask yourself how you would use it in a game, because the very basics of this is that if you want to make your own UI, it's by adding a new window to a scene. That is the very start of making your own UI, is adding a window to a scene. And then what we'll get into is populating the window with information and all of that. But I think if you go, hey, this makes me think I might want to make like a UI scene that does something specific, that can sort of fuel any other questions that you might have. And we're probably a little bit early for you to be making an entirely new scene. But we'll get there. The goal is to get there. So, no need for immediate questions. As long as it's all making sense.
I have a bit of a proposal. So we know how to make windows. In the old Final Fantasy games, when you opened up the given that I'm the Final Fantasy nut, I would need to go through that. But in the old Final Fantasy games, when you open the window, you would have the command window, you would have the actor window, and then near the bottom, they would have the gold window. There would be playtime as well, but they would have a step counter. And they would actually use this for certain spells, right? They would use it as like a randomizer, right? Mm-hmm. So depending on how many steps you've taken. Now, I always wanted to see the step counter on the map. Would we be able to set that up?
Absolutely. Let me actually make sure, because I know there's an increase steps function, which I believe is used to determine the encounter rate. So I'm pretty sure as long as this number doesn't reset, I'm pretty sure we can use this number here. So I actually that is the perfect direction to take this. Moving on from the scene title, let's look at how the map scene. So First, I just want to say, so scene_title.prototype.create. If you search for .create equals function in RPG scenes, you're going to find a bunch of instances, because just like initialize, all scenes have a create function. And so understanding the structure of these classes just by noticing sort of repeated patterns is very useful. So you can see scene title creates the background, creates the foreground, creates the window layer, creates the command window. I'm going to skip scene map for a second. Scene menu creates the background, updates the actor, creates the window layer, then creates the command window, the gold window, the status window. Okay, cool. Scene item base does everything the previous one does. Scene item does everything the item base does, which was all the stuff the window stuff does. Then it creates the help window, the category window, the item window, the actor window. So we're noticing a pattern in the create function, which is that it is the function that creates all the windows. So if I ever want to add a window to the game, especially a window that is there as soon as the scene is loaded, it seems like the create function for that specific scene is where I want to put it. So let's go back to not scene menu, scene map. So it doesn't seem to create any windows. I'm actually not sure, just looking at this, where the message window is created. Maybe that's a question we should ask ourselves at a later date. But for now, I think because we know that this is, wait a second, create display objects. A window's a display object, right? Oh, the window layer is created in create display object. Every time we create a window, the create window layer function is called sometime before. Whoa, there's this function called create all windows. Well, that might be a good function to put our window in. Okay, cool. Let's go with that. And I'm sort of feigning ignorance a little bit because I think it's funny, but also because I think it's a good framing device to sort of see how we can use our foundational knowledge and like just the little bit of knowledge that we do still have, that we already have for how RPG Maker works, to find out where we need to go to find out more information. And so this sort of like organic research. So here we have a situation where I'll say create step counter, and then I'll want to say scene map dot prototype dot create step counter equals function, and then does create message window give me any information that's going to be really useful? Oh, that's the wrong. That's the wrong.
Yeah. So while you're hunting around, Vibrant Fervor had a really good suggestion. So they're looking for a way to call actor command windows in battle. So once we're done with the step counter example, would you be okay with us editing the windows in scene battle so that like they know kind of where they need to look to implement it in their game?
That's gonna be a little bit more advanced. So we're gonna see how easily we can do that in real time. But yeah, I think that's something that we can do. So create message window, it says new window message, and then it says add window, and then it does something with sub windows. That's probably not something that we need to worry about right now. So let's take this code and let's say, okay, create step counter, this dot step window. And actually, maybe I want to rename this because they all say create something window. So I'll say create step window. That's more in line with the way that RPG Maker works. So that essentially, if we can get used to the way that RPG Maker writes its code, and we write our code the same way, that makes our code equally as readable as RPG Maker's code. And if we get good at reading RPG Maker's code and we get good at reading our own code, anybody else that writes code the same way, we can get good at reading their code too. So all plugin developers will benefit from working together by using the same coding standard. So we don't want a window message. We want a window base, right? and we want it to be in the corner of the screen, right? I'm going to say the bottom left corner, right? Unless you want it to be in the bottom right corner. Neil, I don't know if you have a preference. But I'll say bottom left.
Let's do bottom left.
Yeah.
We're doing left-hand pride today. Yeah.
Every day is left-handed pride for me. So I know how pixel coordinates work in this, right? When we created a new window, this is 4040. So the top left corner is 0 0. So if I go higher on the X value, that brings me farther to the right. If I go higher on the Y value, that brings me farther down. So I know that the X we want is going to be 0 because that's the farthest left. The Y, however, equals, if I make that 0, it'll be the top left corner. That's not what I want. I want access to graphics.box height, and then I want to subtract, what's the height going to be? 40? Sure. Minus 40. And then we'll say var width equals probably 80 to make room for a number. We might have to change that later. That'll be fine. And then var height equals 40. We already established the height was going to be 40. So now we've got those variables. We can just plug them into our new window base. And if I save this, we've got the window we created on the title, and then we've got a basic window, which is absolutely not going to be tall enough. That's my bad. Let's make this 120, and let's make this 80.
It's so tiny.
It's so tiny.
So this is actually a fairly important thing for Windows. So let's say that you're trying to create a window, and like us, you're trying to draw text. A very common problem you may run into is that the text will go sort of over the line, right? And the solution that RPG Maker usually does is just doesn't draw the text, right? So it's attempting the thing, right? But because there isn't enough what's called line height, right? It will not be able to actually draw the thing that you're trying to write within the window. So just be aware when you're getting a window that's blank, right? Maybe there's not enough space for the text that you want to draw within there.
And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, okay, var steps equals, we had gameparty.steps. Oh, this is a function. We can get the steps value, so I can say gameparty.steps. Cool. Then I can say this dot step window dot draw text, and I'll want to look at the parameters that draw text needs. Not drea text, draw text. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly what this means, this dot contents. We can maybe take a look at that later. For now, really all I wanted to know was the parameters. So it needs the text and then the coordinates, max width, and then the alignment. I'm not sure I know what align means, so maybe I want to look at other instances of draw text where I can see sort of an example of what's being passed here. Okay, so it looks like status and then an X coordinate and then a Y coordinate and then, and then we've got a width and then we've got a string that just says right here. Let me see if I can find another sort of example. Oh, well, this time that coordinate isn't being passed at all. It's just being ignored. So there's probably a default value that we can assume if we omit this, it'll just default to something, so it's probably fine. And here we've got the value is center. So we've got a string here that we can pass that determines the alignment. We can assume it's left, right, or center. That probably determines, if we go into a word processor, if we left align, right align, or center align text, this probably works exactly the same way. So what I'm going to say is we want to draw the steps. We'll say 0, 0 for the coordinates, and then the width is probably 120, and then the alignment will say to be right aligned, because numbers, it makes more sense to right align it. So if I go in, it's not drawn. Neil, do you have any idea why
I think you may need to. I think you may need to. So right now you're giving it a number. I think it's looking for a string. Am I right on that?
That's a pretty good guess. RPG Maker and actually JavaScript has no problem turning numbers into strings. There's no S here, but that is a good guess. There are actually probably a couple things wrong. I could guess that maybe the contents of the window being smaller than the actual size of the window. That'll factor in. So the general contents are, if I go to standard padding, it's 18. So the actual width is 18 times 2 times smaller. Sorry, 18 times 2 pixels smaller than the width. And I'm hard coding values, which I absolutely shouldn't. And that's the actual width that we have, but it's not displaying at all. So I'm wondering if maybe this still isn't large enough. If I need to make it even bigger, and I'll just set this.
While you're fiddling with that, I have a couple of just one question itself that Reiko brought up.
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed earlier that you were adding messing around with default values and stuff. Could your plugin just be adding new functionality to a lot of base window classes that are available in RPG Maker? So Reiko's asked, could a plugin be simply adding a list of windows of different sizes and contents you can show, hide, open, and close with a simple plugin command?
Yeah, absolutely. In
Those
fact,
base behaviors are accessible via JavaScript.
Yeah. So technically, this is not necessarily the proper way to access these things. However, it is the best way to access them. If I ever need to access a window and I don't have direct access to it, I can just get access to the scene by using scenemanager.scene and then the name of the variable that the window contains, which in this case would be step window, right? So this in the console gives me access to the window. So if I were to say hide, it hides. If I were to say show, it shows. If I were to say dot y minus equals 40, it moves upward. So if at any time you want to, maybe not using plugin parameters, but if you wanted to inject code by using a script, you can say scenemanager dot underscore scene dot and then the name of the variable that the window is stored in, and then you can say dot hide or dot show from there. You don't even need a plugin for that. You can just use that using the script command in base RTP. But that is an excellent question.
I think this also sets up possibly a future lesson. So once we have sort of built the foundation that here's how you make a plugin, here's how you can make functions within the plugin, I think talking about plugin parameters and plugin commands could be a decent follow up to this.
Absolutely. So now we've got a window and it displays the text 0, and it looks like, just sort of based on what I'm seeing, that maybe the reason why it didn't display was not because it didn't fit, but because it was right aligned. So if I set this to 120 again, and I'll set this back to 80, but I set this to left instead of right. We'll do that. We can see that it's displayed. If I set this from left to right, we want to double check our hypothesis here. It's not being displayed. And the reason it's not being displayed is because it's trying to draw over here past the boundary, because it thinks the space we have to draw is larger than it actually is. So I'm gonna set this to about 100, and we'll see if we actually have the space for it this time. No, not quite. Let me try 80. That'll probably be sufficient. And if not, then I'm gonna yeah, here we go. So now we're displaying the amount of steps we've taken. Except that there's a problem. I'm going to take a step, and it's not updating. And just to double check that that's the case, I'm going to say game party dot steps. That's 9. This is 0. What's going on here? I'm gonna enter the menu, then I'm gonna come back.
Actually,
and now it updates.
I think Chris might be able to answer this one.
Chris, do you have any idea what's going on here?
Thought it.
You want me to show you the code?
Sorry to put you on the spot, but yeah, but I do, like, you know enough code to know like what the error is here.
It kind of seems like the window doesn't update unless you're destroying it.
That's you're 90% correct. There's a very slight change I would make to that sentence to make it 100%.
Yeah, because it's not destroying it because the window's not going anywhere, but it's not updating until you change the scene or something like that.
So
because it's flipping when you go into the menu scene, right?
It is flipping when I go into the menu scene, but specifically, I'm in the menu scene. It still says 24. When I leave the menu scene, now that's when it updates. You want me to give away the answer? I mean, you're basically correct. I would give you full marks if I were grading you.
Heck yeah. Okay, you can spoil it for me then.
So the reason is that this line of code that says draw text, this is in the create function. This is only being executed when the window is created. So we're not drawing anything when I move. We're only drawing something when the window was first created. And when I leave the scene by entering a different scene, I come back and the window is created a second time. And so it gets drawn for a second time.
See, I would have guessed that if the opacity was changing underneath the window as well.
Yeah,
because it's not
so let me explain.
Being layered on top of itself.
So Isaiah, go ahead and open the menu. And I think this is actually fairly important. So when, by default, RPG Maker, when you go into a menu, and also you all will see this when you go into a battle, but you haven't set a battle pack, right? There's a function that takes a screenshot of the previous frame before you change scenes, right? That is what you're seeing. You're seeing like a bitmap, right, of what that, like a screenshot of what that screen was. There's no actual window there. Step counter doesn't exist in this.
Yeah.
But you see step counter still there because that was on the final frame before you moved.
That's cheeky.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, you're in a completely different scene from scene map right now. And when you return, we are creating scene map all over again, and this time setting the player coordinates to exactly where they were when we left. And because we're creating it all over again, we create another window. And the original window is destroyed. You were right about that. Whenever we change scenes, all of the previous windows are gone. Poof, they don't exist. But then when we re-enter the scene, the window's back. And because it's back and now our value is different, it draws something different. So there are a couple different ways to get it to update whenever you step. One of the ways might be, let's check out when game party increases steps, and then we'll tell it to draw again. So I'm gonna use that method. I think it's probably pretty much what I would do. I might see if there's some way that I can do it from the scene so that I can reference the specific variable that feels like it would be better practice. But I think this is totally fine for now. I can say game party increase steps. When we do that, we'll say, okay, var step win equals scene manager dot scene dot step window. It doesn't feel good to access windows this way, but at least we can do it within one line. And I can say, okay, step win dot draw text. And I can say game party dot steps, but since the variable's right here, I might as well say this dot steps. And then I'll supply the same coordinates. I'll make sure that, that's all the same. And we should be good to go. It should update every time I take a step. Chris, can you guess what the problem is going to be this time? It's unfair to ask you. I think Neil will know the answer, but this probably won't occur to you. But as soon as I do it, you're gonna be like, I understand what's going on.
Yeah. So okay. So in-game party increased blah blah.
Yeah, Neil, can you guess what the problem is going to be?
Sure. Yeah, you're gonna draw on top of the previous number. You're not clearing the window.
That's exactly right. So when I take a step,
that's kind of similar to what because it's what I said would happen, would steer me towards the right answer on the previous window.
Yeah.
Is that these numbers are just drawing on top of each other.
So it is drawing. It is updating whenever we take a step, which is great. However, whenever we draw something, that is not erased merely by the fact of us drawing a second thing, which is great. We don't want everything to be erased as soon as we draw a second thing. That would make it impossible to make things look way over the top in terms of like detail, like colliding with each other. However, it does mean that we need to do something specific in order to make it so that this guy doesn't have this specific problem. So there are a few different potential ways we can do this, but let's see if we can figure out how other windows do this. So window base may not have this information because it has a lot of different drawing information. It's got draw text, actor name. Okay, it converts the actor's name to a string. That's great. We've got, let's see, draw icon, make font bigger. That's cool. Oh, here's the actual draw icon, which draws it. We have draw face, draw character. These functions can be very useful to us later if we want to look at what they do and how they work, if we want to draw specific images. But it's not exactly what we're looking for.
I was going to request that, like, once we got this working, that in the icon set, there's like a boot, right? So similar to how the Go window has like the readout and then the icon after that, would we be able to like add the icon to this window?
Absolutely, yeah. So let's see if we can find a function that does this. Maybe the research is not necessarily going to be super fruitful in this case, just because I need what's a function that does this? Maybe window item list. So something that it does whenever you use the items, the information can change, and as a result, it needs to draw things differently. So it's got a function called refresh, which says make item list, create contents, and draw all items. So drawing all the items, that's going to draw everything. What is create contents? Contents equals new bitmap, contents width, contents height, reset font settings. That might be what we're looking for, and it does belong to window base. So we could say stepwin.create contents. Let's see if that works. And, maybe someday we'll investigate what these contents are. And it does seem to work. So, actually, contents, create contents. I remember something when I looked at draw text. I remember something very specific. I said draw text, and then it says this.contents.drawText. We're creating contents, and then we're drawing on the contents. So whatever contents is, it is the thing where our text is located. So when we create a new one, it's reasonable to say that maybe we're getting rid of the old one and replacing it with a new one. And that's how we are. Essentially, we're scrapping the stuff we were originally using, creating a new one completely, and then drawing on top of that. So that's great. Now we, without even looking into contents, without even looking at what content specifically refers to, we've learned something important about it, about its relationship with Windows. And just because we wanted to draw some steps. But Neil is right. We should draw an icon. We should have our boot icon. What index is the icon for the boot? Stop me when you find the boot.
It'll be within the equipment. So go for the green icons, and it's like right next to the cloak.
Yes.
There's like a double boot, and I think the single boot you can find within the blue icon. But I think go with the double boot for now.
I feel like I remember
There's a single boot somewhere too. I know it's on one of the cards.
Yeah.
In the demo project.
You can also use the escape one, because it's just like a running stick figure.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the escape one is near the top. It is under lightning. So lightning is
Okay, so let's use this. Let's go to our code and let's look at how we saw draw icon earlier. Process draw icon just calls draw icon, so that's probably not what we want. And we want an icon index and an X and a Y coordinate. We know what the coordinates are going to be. Icon index probably refers to this number, 82 in the corner. When I click on a different icon, the icon index, that number changes. So it's probably that. So if I say step win, dot draw icon, I'll say 82 and then I'll say 00, and it'll just be in the left corner. So let's see if that works. Oh, that's interesting. It does not work. Chris, you should know why this doesn't work.
I should know that one, huh?
This is I like this. I like asking you guys why something isn't working. That's really fun for me.
Is it the same issue as before? Is it drawing to the right of where we're drawing the steps?
It is not the same issue. It's a completely new issue, but it's a purely logical issue. If I move this slightly over, all of the information that you need to solve this puzzle is on screen right now.
And folks in chat, feel free to chime in as well.
Yeah. If anybody in chat can tell me why this isn't working, what the problem is, I'll give you 5 points.
Unfortunately, they're whose line isn't anyway points. Hold on. So it's not an order of execution thing, because it would have drawn over everything else, because that's the consistent behavior for everything else. So it's not that.
Would you like me to give you a hint?
Yeah, I need a hint. Yeah, I need a little hint.
Okay, here's the hint.
Okay. So it's a creation thing, right? That we're creating the window and but why is the icon not drawing if it's
Well, the icon's here now. What happened?
Yeah,
because we
want me to step in?
Yeah, you can go ahead, because I understand that it's an update step thing. So it's making when we update, but not when we instantiate it.
Yeah. So the functions that we're calling when we instantiate and when we update are different, right? It's on the screen in front of you. So what are we calling when we create it?
Yeah. So
there we go.
When we create
put it in update, but not in create step window.
Yes. When we
right.
create it, we've got these 2 lines, but when we update it, we've got way more. We've got 3 lines. Well, we've got more than 3 lines, but you know what I mean. So this is exactly where a new function would be useful. Now, this is a window base, so maybe we want to add this function to window base, or maybe we want to create a new class. I don't think we want to get into creating a new class right now. So I think it's more useful to add this functionality to window base. So I'll say window base.prototype dot update steps equals function. And how do you make it so it updates every X amount of frames? That is an excellent question. We will cover that. I'm going to do that as soon as this is done. So update steps is a new function in which we're going to say, let's take this code and we'll say this dot create contents, this dot draw text, this dot draw icon, but we can't reference this dot steps anymore because that belongs to game party. So we still want to do var steps equals game party dot steps, and then reference it that way. So now, instead of having this code, we can say this dot step window dot update steps, and then step window in the increase steps functions, we can say step win dot update steps. And now this should work right on its own. Should be no problem. We can see the icon is there. And if we want to change anything about the appearance of this window, what it's drawing, like, you know, what icon it's drawing, if we want to put like a character portrait in there, if we want to make it bigger, then, you know, we're going to have to change the coordinates. But if we want to change what's being drawn inside, we can do that inside one function. We don't have to look across our entire plugin. This one function is sufficient. Any change I make here will ripple across all other places where the function is called.
Okay, so this is really good. We made a step counter. So what about what Reiko's requesting, right? So
Yeah.
right now this updates on our input, right? Could we create a window that has a number that updates just as the game is running?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's a good use case for this, right? Like, like time, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's say we're having a day-night cycle. How would we do that?
So something that I see some people implement, which is great, is a time played window. Time played specifically, there's a function to get how much time you've played formatted as a string. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to say a number that increments by 1 every second. And I think that's probably fine. So I'm going to repurpose our step counter for that purpose. Or, you know what? Step counter on the left, timer counter on the right. That's what we're going to do here. And so I'm going to say this dot timer counter equals new window base, and that's going to be graphics dot box.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. You're doing it within the step window call.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that's bad practice. Thank you for correcting me on my programming etiquette.
Sorry about that.
No, you're absolutely right to do that. We gotta be good role. I've been on my A game this whole session, and then so equals new. Let's set the variables again, because if I set this to the, if I say box width as the X value, then it'll be off the screen. So I could say, minus 180, and that'll be fine. And then 180, 80. I don't like these numbers just sort of flying around. But it'll do for now. You could see I used variables previously, and that is much nicer. It's easier to read. I'll say this dot add window, this dot timer counter. And I wonder if there's something that we can do, because we want it to be window based. You're not going to interact with it directly, but I wonder if there's something.
Maybe use this to show them the refresh method, because the refresh method is just a way of getting the window to update automatically, right?
So refresh is actually a window selectable function. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so does window base update then?
Window base does have update, and that's what I was going to pretend to look for. So refresh is a function that window selectable is called, which clears the contents. It uses contents.clear instead of creating new contents. There's not necessarily a huge difference between those two things. But refresh is sort of automatically called whenever new information is added, at least in current Windows. If you make your own window, you're going to have to manually call refresh, because it doesn't necessarily know when new information is being changed. However, the update function, let me find which belongs to window base. This is a function which is called every single frame. And so, if I were to add this behavior to window base, if I were to say window base update and then have this dot update timer counter, this could be a problem because this will apply to every window base. And the secret is that I said there are 3 different types of windows, base, selectable, and command. Selectable inherits from base, and command inherits from selectable, which means it inherits from base. Which means that if I put this function inside window base, it will appear in every single window. So that might not be something that we want to do. So I think this is actually a perfect situation where we want to actually create our own window class. And in order to do that, I think we should look at how window classes are created. Let's find window selectable. Window selectable, it says function this.initialize.apply, and then prototype equals object create. We covered this all sort of briefly earlier at the beginning of the session. Let's talk about how to apply the information that we used here. So I'm going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to say we want window dot timer, right? We do want it to inherit from window base, but we want to use window.timer here. We want to set the constructor to window.timer. And wow, we've just made a new class. We just did that. It took 5 lines of code and we made a new class? Wild. So now I can just say timer counter equals new window timer. Well, hold on a second. Just to be safe here, window selectable also has an initialize function where it takes the same 4 parameters and then it calls window base's initialize function. And then it does some extra stuff, like setting new variables. Oh, we're going to need new variables, aren't we? So let's take what window selectable does. We don't need any of the variables that window selectable has, but we do need this dot, and I'm going to use 2 underscores time equals 0. We got to initialize because that's going to increment by 1, and when it reaches 60, a full second will have passed. And then this dot seconds, that'll equal 0. And these are the 2 variables that we're going to need in order to update things. Oh, we want to make sure not to forget.
Underscore seconds just in case.
You're right. This should be a private variable.
Just in case, yeah.
So now, window timer is gonna call this initialize function. It's gonna call the window base version of it, so it'll do everything that window base does, and then it'll add this extra little bit. So now we can say, okay, window.timer.prototype.update, and this is a function which is called once a frame, so 60 times a second. The original one didn't have any parameters, so we don't need to worry about that. We do want to call the original window base function. So we'll say windowbase.prototype.update.call this to make sure that it does everything that window base does in its update. We don't want to lose that functionality. And then we can say this dot time plus plus. And then if this dot time equals 60, and I don't think it'll go past 60 without this triggering, but just in case, I always like to do this, just to make sure that I'm covering my bases. Then we can set this dot time to 0 to reset it, and then this dot seconds plus plus. So these variables will update. Inside the update function, the time increments once every frame, and then the seconds variable increments once every 60 frames, which is once a second. It's not exactly once a second because sometimes the program can slow down, but it's close enough to 1 second for our purposes. But we do want this dot refresh. I think Neil was right to suggest refresh here, because even though refresh is not a window base function, we can still use it like one. We can create our own refresh function. How does refresh work? It says if this.contents.clear, which is the same functionally as making new contents.
Yeah.
Then,
that's why I was like, we should look at the refresh method, because refresh sort of inherently does the thing that we want kind of wanted to do, right? It does the clear, right, and then you draw it again.
And then draw all items is a Windows selectable specific function, so we probably don't want that. But we do want this dot draw time, I suppose, and then we'll create a new function called window timer dot prototype dot draw time, and this will contain the information about how we're drawing the time. We can copy this information from update steps. I think it's probably
grab the icon as well.
Oh, you're right. Maybe we want to change the icon, but
there's some good clocks. There's a hourglass, I think, that we can reference.
So, and I'm going to give you a little bit of extra useful information here. So, this .draw text is inside window timer. The contents is the space in which the information is being drawn. So for the width, instead of it being just 80 and we assume that that's going to fit, maybe we want to change the size of window timer and then we have to scroll down and change the 80 here. That's a lot of work. We can say this.contents.width. And whenever we change the width of the window, when we create the window, the contents that size will be based on that. So we always have as much space as the window is wide in order to draw this information. And as for what icon to use, is there a clock somewhere in here? There's got to be, right?
Yeah, check out blue icons. There's a pretty decent hourglass in there.
Hourglass.
It's next to the mortar and pestle, next to the cross. Yeah,
and that's icon 220. So, I did all of that, and I haven't run the game to make sure I haven't made a mistake. I created a new class, I gave it a bunch of properties, I gave it a refresh function, I called the refresh function once a second, I gave it a draw time function, and then I added it to the game. Let's make sure that nothing has gone wrong in all of that time. Okay, steps is not defined. I think just about anybody can guess what the error is here. Draw text steps in draw time? Oh, because I copied from update steps, it's using a variable that doesn't exist. I want to use this.seconds. Silly me. And that's the danger of copy pasting, and definitely a lesson I intended to teach you, and not a mistake I made as a result of copy pasting and then forgetting about it. So it's working.
Reiko, as you can see, every 60 frames, which is roughly 1 second, it's going to increment and it's going to keep going up. And you can have it do a countdown as well. That's relatively easy to do. This is actually a very important thing about the RPG Maker engine, which is very different from other engines in the market right now. RPG Maker is a little bit old school. It is a frame-based engine. Primarily, right? You can still do things that are tied to real time, but most of the interactions will be happening on a frame basis.
And honestly,
make sure to keep that in mind. Yeah.
And honestly, for the most part, I don't recommend trying to time things to real time. There are exceptions, but for the most part, I don't recommend it because it can mess with the timing of like execution of certain things that can cause cascading issues. There is just one last thing that I would change about this window, and that's that it doesn't draw anything for the 0th second. And how we fix that is we just call refresh inside the initialize function. And boom. And there we have it. We have a window that increments whenever we take a step. We have a window that increments every second. And what happens if we talk to a guy? These windows exist on top of the this other window, which can cause a problem. Neil, actually, let me ask Chris. If you had to guess, how would I make it so that the text window obscures these two windows instead of the other way around?
I think. All right. So, just going off of things that have happened in this lesson, like make the window a new scene.
I'm just
But
constantly
there's probably
fooling
a
you. I'm
better
so
way.
sorry.
Is there a command within Windows to make it draw over, like a method that they have baked into the engine?
So, you would think so, and to my chagrin, making card game combat, the answer is that the way they do it is that they remove the window that's behind and then just add it to the scene a second time. So that instead of being at the beginning of the array of windows, it's at the end of the array.
Okay, but in order to do that, you'd also have to stop these from updating when you make the new window. Well, I guess that's the way you would properly do it, is you would have them be on the lookout for when new windows are made so that they stop updating when a new one. But that probably isn't easy.
So, what's really interesting about this is that it feels like it should be really complicated, but it is surprisingly very easy. So, you see this create all windows where I create the message window, then the scroll text window, then the step window, then the timer window. If I just create these windows before the message window, they will be behind the message window. And that's it. That's all it takes.
Huh.
Just create them first. That's it.
Wait, so even
RPG
though
Maker
they're...
is a trove for like dumb solutions like this.
But that's so weird, because even though, I mean, to me, it seemed like the issue would be that they're the windows that update more often, so that's why they're in. But if you just create them after,
because
or before,
so
rather,
essentially, when we call add window, what we're doing is we're adding the window to an array of windows to render. And so whenever we render all the windows, we do them in the order they appear in the window, or in the array. And so whenever RPG Maker encounters a situation where two windows exist in the same coordinates, it just draws the new window on top of the old window, erasing the old window in the process. Not erasing, but making invisible.
Okay, I kind of see it. Where that's because, and that's kind of the purpose of like the show hide windows, like having base functionality, is that you just declare all the windows you're going to use at the start, and then you flip them around as you need them.
Exactly.
It's silly, but okay.
That's pretty standard case. Okay, so we're coming up on about 2-ish hours here. Vibrant Fervor's question, I think we should probably cover. So I know that like we've been waiting for Excella. I think they may have just fallen asleep. So maybe we should save the game showcase for next month.
Yeah.
Right. I know this will lead to sort of a drier stream, but I would actually just like the information to be out there so people can kind of scrub through. I think we've made pretty good progress on like being able to create windows in multiple scenes. So what Vibrant Fervor is asking is that they, in scene battle, they want to do sort of a Libra action. Like it's scanning the enemy, it's getting some like basic information on the enemy within that window. So I think that for us to be able to do that, Isaiah, would it be possible to create a window in scene battle? And then when you target an enemy, it gives you like the enemy's name and like a couple stats.
Yes. So I'm going to go into I'm gonna go into battle just to sort of imagine what that looks like. I'll say battle processing 2 bats. So essentially what we want is we want so when I'm selecting perhaps like as an attack, whenever I'm highlighting one of these two enemies, there's a window that's up here which has information about the specific enemy, probably the actual like enemy data, and maybe like a character description, which if I were creating a plugin for other people to use, I'd say desk and then a bunch of text and then close desk. If we wanted
let's
to make
the simplest version. Like, so let's create like sort of a budget version of like visual HP bars, right? So rather than creating a gauge, right, it just shows you like what their name is and what their HP readout is.
Yeah.
Would that be okay?
That's absolutely something that we can do. I don't know if it's something we can do within the time frame, but it's definitely doable.
So I think let's and I know that it's getting late on your end. I think this should just be the final thing that we do for the script. It is show that you can do this. You can make new windows in scene battle, and also you can sort of extract information from an object, right, and populate the scene, right, with those. We already did a little bit of this with the step counter, but it'll be good to see what game battler and then game enemy and game actor sort of look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at so we want to create a new window for the scene, for the battle scene. I'll just real quick say function window dot enemy info. Let me make sure that there isn't an enemy info window that already exists, because if I create a new class that has the same name as another class, that causes problems. But it looks like we're good. They all say this dot initialize dot apply this arguments, which essentially means it calls the initialize function of that specific window. We do want it to inherit from window base, because you're not going to be interacting with the window. You're going to be interacting with the other things that make the window visible. So that's all fine. Let me get rid of the highlight. And then window.enemyinfo.initialize equals function. Maybe we don't want to pass arguments here. Maybe we want to say var x. Maybe we want to define the coordinates in here. Var y equals 0, var width equals 100, var height equals 80. Now this has got to be 180. And we can say window base dot prototype dot initialize dot apply this x, y, width, height. You can tell I'm very practiced doing this specific thing. And now we want to create some new variables, which is this dot current enemy equals null. And we'll populate it with an actual enemy in, for example, window.enemyinfo.prototype.set enemy equals function. We want to enemy. And we'll say this dot current enemy equals enemy. And then we'll want to call this dot refresh to say, okay, repopulate the info now that you have new information. I'm going to copy this function that I created for window timer to refresh the information. I'm going to say draw enemy info, and then new function window enemy info dot prototype dot draw enemy info equals function. So I've created a class and I've created a bunch of different functions, but all of these are doing things that we've already seen things happen today. So I feel like we can go through it pretty quickly. We do want to go to scene battle to see where its create function is. It does have create display objects inside the create, and then create all windows. Oh, great. So that's the place where we put this window. So what I've been doing in this plugin so far is I've just been copying and pasting and then adding stuff. Like for create all windows, I've been copying the previous stuff and then adding stuff on top of that. But that's not good etiquette. But I did define Isaiah earlier. That's an object that we can store the old functions inside. So I can say Isaiah dot scene battle create all windows equals And then I want to copy scene battle create all windows. This is something that we talked about last month, but in case people need a refresher, because it's been a month and everybody was tired then and they are tired now. Create all windows is a function which is actually stored in a variable called create all windows. So if I want to change what that function contains, I want to get a copy of that function stored in a new variable. And then I can call that original variable as a function. So it will do everything that the original one did, and then whatever stuff I have before this. This is great so that if you have... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is when you're extending like a plugin, like compatibility and things like that. This is the way that you want to generally structure your functions, right? Because that way you're carrying over whoever came sort of before you, right? You're sort of able to carry over whatever their work is, or both of you can use the same base function, right? But you're using your own versions of it, right? And then somebody down the line can still access the base function, right, if they need it for their plugin. So this is more like programmer etiquette, right? If you're making plugins for yourself, some of the earlier methods that we that we showed the stream are probably okay. But if you're going to make them for the purpose of other people to use, this is probably the best way to do it. The way that Isaiah has shown right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I've saved. All we've done is created a window. We haven't actually given it anything to draw, but just to make sure that it's actually working. Okay, something's going on. It does not appear to be here. So let's find out what the issue is. I'm adding the child. I am creating all windows. I said this.initialize.apply. So this.initialize.apply takes the instance that is calling the function and then all of the arguments that are being called. So whenever I say new window enemy info, which is down here, any functions that I pass are put into a array called arguments, and then they are turned into parameters in initialize. But if I'm passing the parameters one by one, I don't want to say apply, I want to say call. And that's the format that lets it know that I have not taken all the parameters and turned them into an array. So now that we fixed that issue, I go into battle. Interesting. Let me make sure scene dot enemy info window. So it's here. It exists. What's its X value? What's its Y value? What's its width? Is it open? I'm actually not sure.
So I think
it's
defaulting to. So you've created XY with height, right? But I think it's just grabbing the base stuff from window base. So right now it's 0 everything.
Its width is 0.
Yeah, it's with a 0. Yeah, so do underscore width just to check.
Well, that shouldn't. If I go to there's like a specific window that has window gold, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says width equals window
height.
Width. Height equals window height, and then it says initialize.call. Am I spelling everything correct? It is pretty late my end, so I would not be surprised if that was the issue.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So I think why don't we? So what's another window that we can basically sort of take most of the properties of, right? My thought is we look at another initialize, right? Effectively copy it, and then get it to show up, and then from there, there is another step usually after window base that I've seen. So it's like this dot.
Here, let me just real quick equals 180.
Yeah.
dot height
So
equals
see if you can
80.
reset the width.
Yeah.
Because it does exist in the scene. Okay.
It
great.
does exist.
Yeah. So there's you have to call this dot something after the initialize. Take a look at the windows in RPG Windows. They do it pretty frequently in the initialize functions. This dot refresh, right? If it's a selectable, look at what. Window gold isn't a selectable, right? It's a window base.
Yeah, it's a window base.
Yeah.
Let's
So it might just be that you basically need a thing that assigns those values. Otherwise, it just defaults to the 0, everything.
Sometimes I see dot move work as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily sure what's going on here. If I was offline and well rested, I'd be able to identify this immediately. But for now, let's say this dot move 0, 0, 180, 80, and hopefully that is sufficient to fix it. That is not a good long-term solution. Even if it does, we generally want to find out what the issue is.
Yeah. Right. So I think we've hit the part of the night where. So I think let's not get bogged down in debugging. Vibrant, would you be okay with us giving you the solution to this problem off stream? Just type in chat. Yeah, that's another important thing, is that is it even calling initialize?
Yeah. And
hey,
now it
shut
works.
up. Okay, all right.
There must be some issue that's going on here. I'll figure out what the issue is later and explain that. But in the meantime, so this is obviously not updating when we select because nobody's calling the set enemy function. So I gotta find out what this window is called, the one that's currently active, right? Now, I can do that in the way that I've previously been doing that and look through the scene and see what's being created, look through the windows and see what name would reasonably sort of be called. But there's another thing that I can do, and I can say scene manager dot scene dot window layer dot children. And there are quite a few windows on this scene, which is why I don't necessarily want to go through all of that. But you can see they all have names. So window.battlelog, battle status, and I know what most of these are. So this guy is battle status, the one that shows your status in battle. Party command is this one. Actor command is this one. Window help is going to be somewhere up there. So let's see if we can find window battle enemy. That's got a list of enemies in it, surely, right? So if I say scene manager dot scene dot, and it's probably named window battle enemy, is probably named battle enemy window, or maybe it's named enemy window. It tends to be named in a way that is similar to its class name. So window gold is gold window. Window message is message window. Battle skill is skill window. And then there's window skill, which is also skill window on a different scene. So if I say .y minus equals, let's say 20. That window moved. So we know that the enemy window is the window that we're looking for. So let's find window battle enemy. So whenever we select somebody, we have access to a function called enemy, which gives us the enemy in question. Let me actually, so I'm highlighted on battle A. Let me test that out. I can say .enemy. Oh, and that gives me a game enemy, and I know how much HP they have. Whoops. I know how much HP they have. Do I know how much max HP they have? It looks like this is attack. This is critical. This is max HP. They really only have 2. Yeah, it's because I messed with those values.
Yeah, it's because you're testing.
So if I know what the current enemy of enemy window is, I could theoretically set it from the console But I think something that we want to do is we want to say, okay, window.battleEnemy.prototype.select equals function, and it calls window_selectable.select. And I'll shortcut the research here. Window.selectable, the select function, is the function that is called whenever you change what the currently selected thing is on a selectable window. Which means it's exactly the function that we want to use to call the set enemy function in enemy info. So let's do this. Let's say, okay, we're down here and we're going to say scene manager dot scene dot enemy info window dot set enemy this dot enemy. Boom. Now the enemy info window has access to the enemy that we are currently selected. Now obviously we want to do Isaiah dot window battle enemy select equals, and then we want to say dot select dot call this index, and then we don't need the previous functionality because we're copying it inside this function. There we go. That's the proper format. Now there's a slightly better way to do this, but I think this is totally fine from here. So now set enemy sets the enemy, it refreshes, and now we can finally draw the enemy info. So we want to say this dot draw text this dot current enemy dot HP plus, and then we'll have out of this dot current enemy dot MHP. That should be fine. And then I want to say 0.0. Oh, I need a plus here. That's what Visual Studio is yelling at me with.
Just left align it so we don't have to play around with.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So here's the question for Chris. I'm sorry, I'm picking on you, Chris. Is it gonna work? Is it gonna crash? I've answered the question for you. So,
but why did it crash?
So, whenever you see a full crash, you can open up the console to figure out exactly where the crash is. And it says this variable does not contain anything. Chris, do you know why scenemanager.scene.enemy info window might be undefined at the time the select function is called? This is a question I fully expect you not to know the answer to, and I'm very sorry I'm picking on you.
Yeah, because I think, okay, so my imagination of it is that it's they're just thinking about what I imagine, possibly the enemy is passed by value and not reference or address, but that's a C++ thing typically, not a JavaScript thing, right?
So I think that's a very that's a very reasonable train of thought. JavaScript does do pass by reference versus pass by value, so sometimes that's true. But in this case, the specific issue is that it can't read property set enemy of undefined, which means it thinks enemy info window, this value is undefined. And remember, enemy info window is defined in create enemy info window, which is called. And we know it's called because the window was there before we added this code. Would you like me to give you a stupid hint?
Yeah.
It is related to a previous question, specifically the one about layers.
Is it because the Oh no. Is it because the windows were the instantiation order of the windows?
Yes. So what happens is create all windows is called, which means that the window battle enemy window is created. When it's created, the select function is called with the index of -1. That's what happens automatically when a window selectable function class window is created. It selects the index of -1, and that means that this line of code happens before this line of code happens, which means the enemy info window has not been created yet. So there are two different ways that we could fix this. The first we can say is we can have an if statement that asks if this exists, and the second is we can move the enemy info window right here, and that should fix the problem. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Oh no, cannot read property HP of undefined. Chris, do you know why that could be? I'm sorry.
Is it because you wait?
I'm
is
just
it
going to tell you.
related to the order of the window instantiation?
Because our stream is going long, I'm just going to tell you.
Oh, okay.
So window battle enemy, this dot enemy, when we select the value of -1, as I established we do when it's first created, this is null. So when we try to set the enemy to null, current enemy is currently null. So when we draw the enemy info, null.hp is not real. So to fix that, we need to say if this dot current enemy, then draw text. And if not, we just don't do it.
One small thing. So once we get HP to display, Vibrant Fervor was wondering if we could show skills. I think let's just sort of show them roughly how. You don't have to actually implement it. I know it's getting pretty late.
Yeah, I need to wrap up pretty soon.
Yeah.
So we can look at the enemy here, and we can see that this is a game enemy class. So we can either look at it through the console, or we can look at it through the code. Sort of, it's up to you to figure out sort of what you want. And it looks like, well, I can't find anything that relates to a specific set of skills that it has access to. These are all the variables that it has access to, right?
Yeah, so it's mostly probably going off defaults. So I think just scroll down a bit. I'll probably know. Actually, go to actions.
Yeah, that was going to be my guess.
Where it might have it. Yeah. Okay, so it has a game action. Yeah, so there. Data class skill item ID 1. That's a normal attack, right? One thing we can do is that we can just briefly jump into the database, give it like fire, right? And then see if you can draw that onto the thing.
Absolutely.
Just sort of show Vibrant Fervor like where you would go to access the thing, and then they can determine the actual format in which they want to do so.
So let me make sure that actions has updated, because it looks like it's just this one, right? It's still just
the default. Okay. Okay, that's mildly annoying. Okay, let's scroll down.
But I wonder
because it'll usually have an array that contains.
This is enemy ID 1, right? If I were to go to
is it
data
is it like data skills?
There we go. Now we have a list of actions.
That's so dumb.
Yes, it's very dumb.
Why wouldn't you just store it on the actor anyway?
So what's happening here, at least what I assume is happening here, I could look it up to verify. What I assume is happening here is this array of game actions is actually the action that it is going to take when next it can move. Like it's already decided that. And I'll see if I say bat B and I look at its action. It looks like it's using the same thing. And if I say guard, if my assumption is correct, then both of them will use attack. That's attack, and that's attack. So
Okay,
I wonder.
so it's
yeah.
So that's the planning skill.
Yeah.
Which is good because we've been getting requests for enemy intents for a long time for CGC, so we can just access that. That's pretty neat. But yeah, if you did want to show, let's say we're hovering over them, what are we accessing in order to draw the text out within our new window?
Yeah. So this is going to be pseudocode at this point because like I need to end the stream pretty soon. But I would say var data enemy equals data enemies, and then this dot current enemy dot, let's see, it was ID, I believe. It was enemy ID. Good thing we double check. This dot current enemy dot enemy ID. Now that I've got the data enemy, I can get the list of actions that it has access to. So I want to find the skill IDs. Okay, so essentially I want to say for each action in data enemy, and this is not real code. You certainly wouldn't
give me the
like
JS file at the end of the thing, and I'll replace it with the
Okay.
with the actual stuff. I'll also do the annotations again. Don't worry, we're going long.
Equals data skills action dot ID, I believe is skill ID. Every time.
Yeah,
and so that's one of the skills that you have. You can add that to an array and then draw the array, or you can say this dot draw text skill dot name, skill dot name, and then supply an X value and a Y value where Y is based on the amount of skills, etc., etc. So that's a very brief sort of quick go over of how you would do that.
Excellent. Yeah. So I'll Vibrant. I'll implement it, right, and then when we post the JS file from this session, it'll be there. So you can use that as the basis for the particular edit that you want. But yeah, I think that does bring us to the end of the stream. So I mean, we made a plugin. I think that's commendable, right? So we made a plugin. We were able to create windows across multiple scenes. We were able to do them with multiple purposes, right? So yeah, if to the folks in chat, thank Isaiah. This is extremely hard to do in real time. Isaiah, thank you so much kind of for your time. We will not be covering Exila's game because I think they're very much asleep. So expect in a couple hours frantic panicking as they realize that they fall asleep.
We'll next time. There's always a next time.
Yeah. So most likely, whenever we do the next stream, that'll be a good time to showcase that. So thank you for tuning in. I know it went a little bit long. It was a little bit dry, but this is what you need to know to make plugins, right? So we'll have the VOD available with chapters. So thank you, Isaiah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Rick on Vibrant, who are still, who are just being absolute troopers, right? For the stream. Get some rest, and if Halloween is celebrated wherever you're at, enjoy it. It is the best holiday, as we
Get
say
some candy
at MythAtelier.
a snack up.
All right. See y'all later.